I've read a lot of shitty books, but I gotta say that American Psycho is one of the worst books I've ever read. In fact, this book is so fucking bad, I wouldn't read it again if you offered me $50 million tax-free, the biggest house in the world, and the key to immortality itself. Now, you know how people are always saying that books are almost always better than their movie adaptations? Well, in this case, it's the exact opposite. In fact, I saw the movie first, and I thought it was terrific, so I went back and I read the book. And now that I think about it, I'm really glad that I did that, because if I had read the book first, then I never would have bothered watching the movie. If you haven't read the book or seen the film, here, let me give you a quick story synopsis. The protagonist and narrator of the story is Patrick Bateman, a successful Wall Street stockbroker who's living in New York City during the late 1980s. He spends most of his time getting reservations for restaurants, exercising, getting beauty treatments, and worrying about what other people wear. Oh yeah, and he also kills a lot of people in very brutal ways, which is why the book's called American Psycho. And that's pretty much it. Of course, you might be wondering, is that really all there is to the book? Yes, that's all there is to the fucking book. That's it. Essentially, there is no plot. All Bateman does throughout the whole goddamn thing is go to restaurants and go to parties and kill some people and exercise and worry about his looks and worry about what other people are wearing, and then goes out and kills some more people. Then he gets some more reservations to go to some more restaurants, and he goes out to more parties and he kills more people, on and on, ad nauseum, until you're so fucking sick of it you want to blow your goddamn brains out. And though some of the book's defenders might say, oh, it's a satire in 80s America, it's a satire in Reaganism, it's a satire in the shallowness of yuppie culture, let me tell you what else the book is. It's a fucking bore fest. It's boring. It's boring beyond the fucking measure of the word. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a satire supposed to be funny? Isn't it supposed to make you laugh? Well, let me tell you something. There's not one goddamn laugh to be had in this whole fucking book. Worse yet, Bateman narrates the tale in first person. Essentially, he's telling the whole story, so you think there'd be at least a token attempt at characterization. You think that his character would come across through the writing, but oh no. He's the same fucking boring, vapid person in the beginning of the book as he is in the end. Now, I don't care that he doesn't change. It's just the fact he's not interesting in the slightest. There's nothing we learn about him that makes him fascinating or compelling as a character. And add to all that, the guy is not even sympathetic in the slightest. He does not do one goddamn thing in the novel that makes you care about him, or like him, or even respect or fear him. He's just an asshole. He doesn't treat anybody well. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. All he does is just fucking kill people and treat people like shit. And I'm supposed to root for this guy? Fuck that. As for story conflict, there is none. Patrick Bateman doesn't struggle against anything throughout the whole book, unless you consider getting a reservation at Dorsia a conflict. Hell, he doesn't even actively struggle against his own insanity. He doesn't even take any active steps to stop himself, like turning himself over to the police, or committing himself to a mental institution, or committing suicide even. About the only struggling you could even say that he does is that he does let one of his female victims go, but he was considering killing her anyway, so that really doesn't count. Also, he does confess all the murders he committed to his lawyer near the end of the novel, but there's just one problem with that. I don't think the confession was done out of any sense of guilt or penance. No, I think he just confessed because he was going batshit insane anyway, so what the fuck does it matter? There is some ambiguity as to whether or not Bateman's really committing these murders or he's doing it all in his mind. Now, that might be nice and all, but there's just one problem. Whether or not the murders are real or not, they're disgusting anyway. You know, I've read some pretty violent books in my time. I've read James Ellroy, and I've read Clive Barker, and I've read Jack Ketchum, and their books can be pretty brutal. But at least in their case, most of their books are brutal for a reason. The violence isn't just there to shock or titillate you. But in the case of American Psycho, I don't see why the violence had to be so brutal and disgusting and dehumanizing. It's literally one of the worst, most sickest books I've ever read. I mean, Christ, it's so fucking bad it makes Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop look like a kiddie flick. And I'm not one of these bleeding hearts who says, oh, portraying violence is bad, showing all this blood and gore is horrible in and of itself, but I would at least like a reason for it. There's no reason for it in this book. It's just senseless brutality. That's all it is. Christ, at one point he shoots one poor woman's hands full of nails and slowly tortures her to death, and in another part he stabs a kid at a zoo and dumps his body in a trash can, and in another part he kills women and grinds them up into sausage. Why? What possible reason could you have for including all this violence? And by the time you get to page 300, assuming you can even stand the book for that long, the violence actually becomes numbing. You sit there wondering, how can this possibly get any worse? But believe me, it gets much worse. Even the sex scenes are boring, and they're about as erotic as watching your grandparents finger fuck each other in a broom closet. And after 400 pages, Ellis doesn't even have the common decency to tie up the story in an interesting way, so the ending is as boring as the rest of the book. About the only good thing I can say for American Psycho is that the prose is marginally competent. But then again, so fucking what? Any decent hack writer with a brain can write good prose. And what little joy you might get out of reading the prose is usually negated by the fact that Bateman goes on incessantly about what people wear. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Bateman goes on for half the fucking novel about what designer labels people wear, how nice they look in the clothes or how bad they look in the clothes, and how much better he looks than they look. You know what? If you're stupid enough to read this book, here's a little drinking game for you. Every time Bateman mentions anything that has to do with clothing or designer labels, take a drink. I guarantee by page 50 you will be fucking plastered. And with any luck, you'll pass out and never have to read this piece of shit book ever again. So to wrap up this review, go see the movie instead of reading this book. Believe me, it'll be a better use of your time.